Anna. It's great to meet you. Congratulations on Appendage coming out.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, so I would love to start with a little bit about how so this film was originally based on a short, is that right? So it was expanded. Tell me about the idea you originally had for the short version of Appendage.
Yeah, absolutely. I was feeling imposter syndrome and anxiety and all sorts of fun things at the time, and I wanted to make a really kind of quick movie about it. And Hulu was doing their bite-sized Halloween thing, so they were like, it literally has to be bite-sized. So that was like a really good challenge. And so it kind of came from that and a session in therapy I had a while ago where my therapist was like, just let's talk to your anxiety. Let's make it a character. Let's have a conversation with it. Let's figure this out. And I thought that that would always be a really interesting movie that was relatable. So the short kind of came from that. And then when it expanded into the feature, the real challenge was, okay, we talked about work in the short and imposter syndrome. And then how can we deepen that and
Hmm.
kind of go through these spirals of hell, if you will, and just really get to the core of the lead's anxiety.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so it's funny. I mean, as we've been speaking, I've been like fidgeting with my fingers off camera, and I
Yes.
know
Like,
that. Well, sorry, what?
I'm also like,
Yes, no, it's like constant, right?
yes, it
And I
is.
noticed that one of the first things we learn about the main character is that she's like fidgeting under the table.
Yeah.
So how did you conceptualize, this experience of anxiety and imposter syndrome in the short and then in the feature length?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The short also has in one of the part like she's kind of like picking at her like folder and there's all these fidgety things and
Hmm.
fidgeting is was a very interesting part of the process because I think it's something that most people don't notice but you're doing to yourself or you're like, and so I was like that is a really interesting representation of like you might not see it on the surface, but if you just look under the table, somebody,
Yeah.
or out of frame, like it looks cool from here, but what's, so I thought that that thematically really fit what the movie was about, which
Hmm.
is so much about being ashamed of whatever's going on in your head, but then realizing that you're not alone and, have compassion for yourself. And that's okay to have these thoughts.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I hope this isn't too much of a spoiler, but one moment that I really liked in the film is where, you said these kind of like this hidden aspect of you, right? Like these things that no one else knows are going on, like they start to become vocalized, right? Like it starts to become something that you can't hide anymore.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about that, like just all the details that you wove in about how to turn this into something that you couldn't hide anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such an isolating experience to go through those feelings and thoughts. And so I think making those thoughts a real monster that is vocalizing them to you and
Hmm.
it just creates real stakes in the way that a person going through it feels like it's really real and it is real. And so that was kind of the main thing is how do we make this feel as real as possible for the audience and create stakes in the same way that it feels. So everything kind of went back to that. And how something like that could ruin your life or like attempt to ruin all these nice things in like this self-sabotaging way.
Hmm. Yeah. What's interesting about that is that when we open, so she's going through some pretty big trouble at work, right? I mean, her boss is kind of like the boss from hell. What made you decide on her livelihood and her identity as like a fashion designer and that aspect of her life?
Yeah, absolutely. It was really important to me that she be an artist
Hmm.
and also be somebody who's the part of their job is to be criticized every day. So when I was conceptualizing the movie, I was like, okay, she could be a screenwriter, but honestly, like that doesn't feel super cinematic to me. With the resources that we have, she could be a filmmaker, she could be a musician or a painter. And I was like, like all those things feel a little too isolated for what I'm looking for.
Hmm.
And I have friends who work in the fashion industry and they tell me some horror stories. And I was like, okay, so this industry, if she's a fashion designer up and coming, she can both be a craftsperson, but also be in this corporate kind of environment where she's being judged for her artistry, essentially.
Yeah, definitely. And how about the body horror in the film? Because there's some pretty exquisite body horror, I think. How did you? What was the development process like for that? Like, how many drafts did you go through? How did you come to that final version of it?
Yeah, it was a very quick turnaround process. I didn't have a lot of time to do too many drafts. I would say probably collectively the script was, worked on for probably 3 months or so, 2 to 3 months. So it was
Okay.
very fast. We were only able to do like about three drafts, but because of the short, I think it was kind of living inside of me for a really long time. So I was able to kind of just get it out really quickly.
Mhm.
But so much of that was inspired by references. Cronenberg's The Fly was a big one
Of
that
course,
really,
yeah.
yeah, that helped me track that. And Raw, Julia Ducournau's Raw, and Black Swan, which is a great psychological horror film, Aronofsky's Black Swan. So those things were really helpful. I just watch them all the time, like over
Yeah.
and over again. So that was really helpful in the timeline that we had to have those references.
Okay, yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much for chatting with us today and congrats on the film coming out.
Thank you so much. It was so nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too. Take care.